What famous person did you regret meeting because they were an butt? Wayne Brady screamed at my sister for taking his picture in Vegas. She wasn't taking his picture. He walked into the shot. He freaked out screaming that he wanted her to show him that she was deleting it. She was trying to explain she didn't even know he was there and showed him the picture that only had a sliver of him in it when she looked through the shots. He continued to berate her about not respecting his privacy in the middle of the strip. She was in tears apologizing for doing nothing wrong and he never acknowledged he was in the wrong and continued to badmouth her as he stormed away. Can't watch him anymore. This one hurt me a lot as a longtime Who's Line fan. I know this won't come as a surprise, but Steven Seagal used to frequent a restaurant I worked at. That dude was a colossal piece of crap. He just treated his very wonderful family like crap and it was obvious he was cheating on his wonderful wife with the Asian nanny. This freaking moron would come into a 10-table restaurant, all 6 feet 5 inches and 300 pounds of him, wearing a gold kimono in the south and would wonder why people were looking at him, so he made us take the entry partition down and put it around his table. He was an absolute trash human being. Also met Peyton Manning one time right after the Super Bowl he lost to the Saints. Who dat? This was at an ultra high-end golf course and we were not allowed to act like we recognized celebrities, which was more awkward than anything. Anyways, he walked up and ordered a beer and introduced himself, but I was already turning to get the beer as he stuck his hand out to shake my hand and tell me who he was. As if I didn't know Peyton Manning was in the grounds when I saw his forehead pull into the parking lot. So I blew off Peyton Manning for a handshake. How many of you losers can say that? Great frickin' guy though. Late to this but poorly sure. It was mid-90s in NY City and wife and I were at a very popular Asian restaurant with a huge wait. He walks in with an entourage and tries to worm his way ahead of everyone else. He tried to play the "don't you know who I am" card. Hostess was having none of it, said "don't know, don't care, you'll wait." They left in a huff. He walks in with an entourage and tries to worm his way ahead of everyone else. I think you meant tried to weasel his way ahead. The porn stars were completely uninterested in anyone when very mechanically signing autographs at a local business convention. I can't say they were rude as much as barely even there. Best was Rob Zombie. Meet him at a book signing for the Lords of Salem at the local Barnes & Noble and he was awesome. Super chill and friendly. I have moderate Asperger's and really freeze up in large crowds, so I was really nervous, but he was literally as sweet as could be and went out of his way to get a picture with me and fist bump me. Fun fact, the crew were telling the line the entire time he will only sign the book and nothing else, and don't bother him. But he said screw that and was signing everything people brought for no charge except the $20 for the book. He was friendly with young kids to old people. Didn't matter. Met Tiger Woods when I was 15. He slapped my hat out of my hand. A different golfer whom I didn't know ran up, picked up my hat and asked if his signature would be okay. I agreed, but I don't know who he was or what his name was, but my grandpa was pleased upon seeing it. Bro, he did this to me at the Hong Kong Open too. Jimmy Fallon. I liked his show and one day while I was getting a tour at NBC Studios he bumped into me and turned around, said sorry and then flipped me off, and it's not like I got in his way. Walked into me from behind. Anyone from Pittsburgh can tell you that Ben Roethlisberger is a horrible person. I have a friend who owns a bar on the south side and he has, on multiple occasions, just walked into the bar and said my friends and I are drinking for free tonight. He also told Arnold Palmer's grandson that he doesn't sign autographs if he's not getting paid to do so. Legend has it he earned a pretty nasty verbal beatdown from Palmer and apparently he's banned from his golf course. Arnold Palmer, on the other hand, was an incredibly nice guy. Lead singer of Smash Mouth showed me a picture of him sticking a beer bottle into a Brazilian woman. Ruined a strolunge for me. Michael Stevens, Source, is from my area, and he came and did what essentially amounted to a Source video live for the students at my high school who wanted to go. It was actually really cool and he's pretty much like he is in his videos. Thank goodness. I would have cried if Michael was bad. I was the butt. I saw Don Cheadle at an airport and was thinking about Ocean's 11 and said to my friend, dude, it's Bernie Mac, and he looked back and said, no, I'm the other black guy from Ocean's 11, but at least you liked the movie. Damn, you fricked up, lol. He handled that pretty well. David Cross is pretty miserable. He's from Atlanta and his sister runs a food truck in town. Her recipes were all named after David Cross Arrested Development type stuff. So my wife and I, being fans of David, asked about it and she told us she was his sister. So for months we chat her up anytime we order food from her truck, and eventually David's in town. She invites us to come to the food truck park to meet him, so we bring a poster from the early 2000s and are super pumped to meet him. We get there and she's very anxious and hesitant to introduce us. Weird, but okay. No, it's okay, I'll introduce you. She doesn't. He was incredibly dismissive and unpleasant. Never heard of anyone having a good interaction with him. Best interaction was with Conan O'Brien. He is a total class act. Chatted him up in a bathroom line of all places and said my wife and I were huge fans. He said we should come by the table to chat. I told him we didn't want to interrupt his dinner, but he insisted, then asked if we wanted pictures, and was super cool. Kurt Vonnegut. I had to get in touch with him frequently for work, at a non-profit, for several years. He was never once even vaguely polite. So it goes. Bill Nye the Science Guy. I was on a field trip in middle school and our teacher saw him. She politely asked if he could say something to us or just say hi. We always watched him in science class. He told her to frick off and basically berated her for bothering him and asking him to speak to a bunch of kids. I'm not sure if he was just having a bad day, but it was not the best experience as a child. This is the third comment I've seen about Bill Nye. How disappointing. Me and my sister saw Alec Baldwin, Tina Fey, and Salma Hayek on the street when we were eating lunch. They were just coming out of a car, about to go into some building next to us. We had no idea why they were together, but in retrospect it was definitely because they were filming 30 Rock together. My sister said, "Oh my god, is that Tina Fey?" and Alec Baldwin turned around and went right in her face and said, "Don't freaking say that, don't speak to us. Why would you say something like that? You can't speak to us, not now." But it didn't really end there. He yelled again at us outside his building, saying, "Don't look over here, turn around and eat your food. Frick off." He sounded genuinely furious at us, almost like he wanted us to yell back and start something with him. Honestly, my sister was on the verge of tears. It was horribly embarrassing. Everybody knows now that Alec Baldwin has a history of screaming at people, but at the time we had no idea. Don't get me wrong, my sister shouldn't have yelled at Tina Fey like that, but the way Alec snapped was straight up scary, like he was about to physically hurt her. Salma Hayek and some other lady who I didn't recognize came over and apologized to us. She asked if we wanted her to go and get Tina and get her autograph because apparently Tina felt bad too, but we said no. She then talked to us about the food we were eating, which was Mexican food, and we ended up having a brief conversation about NY's lack of quality Mexican food. She was incredibly charismatic and sweet. I met Baldwin once myself. I always look for his name in threads like this to see if anyone else has had a similar experience. The guy was a complete butthole, even after borrowing a pen to write some notes for an impromptu speech he was about to give. It about ruined 30 Rock for me. I sat next to Rosario Dawson on a flight from LA to Austin while she was shooting Death Proof. I didn't recognize her and she kept trying to strike up conversation while I was studying for a Cal 2 final. I was in Butthole to her until it came out that she was Rosario Dawson. Then we had a very pleasant conversation. I regret meeting her because I am the butt. I saw incessantly flummoxed on this thread early with a post that Rosario wrote. My fiance is a chef at a pretty prominent boutique hotel restaurant in Philly. He says the two worst guests were Ariana Grande, made not one but two servers cry, and the Rolling Stones. The best guests were Sylvester Stallone, Pink, Lady Gaga, and Guy Fieri. Guy Fieri seems like a bit of a tool on his shows, but every time his name comes up in these threads, people always say he's a really good dude. My dad has been a radio personality for over 30 years and worked in country music for over half of it. He gets to meet celebrities semi-regularly. Apparently Keith Urban was really nice. Carrie Underwood was kind of mediocre BC. He caught her right after her performance and she was tired. But Kenny Chesney puts the D&D bag. Direct quote from my dad. Kenny promised to sign some pictures, shirts, etc. for a couple of kids who won a game through the radio. Kenny instead took a bunch of groupies into one of the back rooms of the radio station with a bottle of whiskey and locked the door. When my dad tried to get him to open the door and fulfill his end of the deal, he called the cops on my dad, and he was lucky enough to get a cop who was a good acquaintance. Cop said there wasn't much he could do other than make Kenny leave, so that's what he did. Kids never got their stuff signed, so my dad gave them some coupons for free pizza. He said that after a few years other radio hosts told him they had similar encounters. I have the perfect combination of bad star good star. It was at Dragon Con, maybe 2005. I'm going through the big autograph room, waiting to get David Carradine's autograph. He looked so mad. He didn't say a word as I told him how much I enjoyed his work. Okay, I get it. Maybe he was having a bad day. Next to Mr. Carradine was Mark Singer, star of Beastmaster, V, etc. Mr. Singer is smiling, talking to people as they go by. He looks genuinely happy to be there. Suddenly, a woman behind me stumbled and dropped a huge stack of materials she wanted autographed. Mr. Carradine looked down on her like she was a bug. Mark Singer jumped over his table and started helping the woman pick up her things. Didn't hesitate one moment, just started helping. That's when I decided that if I ever became famous, I was going to try to be like Mark Singer, not David Carradine. David must have learned from his father. John Carradine used to live in my area years ago, and my grandfather would see him in a local diner. My grandfather said he was surly, rude to everyone and a crappy tipper. After he would leave, my grandfather would give his waitress extra money for having to deal with him. Bobby Flay. We paid hundreds of dollars to go to a fancy event he was participating in. Waited for a long butt time to just meet him and say hi. He looked at us and walked away. Was a dong about it too. Ugh. Whenever I'm watching a Chopped with Bobby Flay as a judge, all I can think is frick Bobby Flay. Prince Andrew. Spent a lot of time around him about 10 years ago, as working at private social events he attended. The guy is a total prick. Maybe he would have been nicer to you if you were younger. I met Shane Dawson at a restaurant I used to work at. He used to come in a few times a year with his fiancée and in-laws. He's a dong lol, none of my servers liked him or wanted to serve his family, and I dang near had to fight some little girls off the property because they would not leave without seeing him. Jared Leto. I worshipped him as a teenager, mainly from seeing him in Requiem for a Dream and My So-Called Life and his band. But he was the most pretentious and arrogant person in real life. Never meet your heroes. I've heard that so often. The way he talks on a lot of news shows never really sat right with me. Then he became a cult leader and I noped out. Reggie Jackson. He was a childhood idol of mine. I got the opportunity to get a photo with him at some booth at a trade show called Internet World years ago during the .com boom. No one was in line to get pictures with him, so I walked up to get a photo while he was apparently trying to get the girls in the next booth over to sleep with him. He acted all bugged that I asked for a photo, even though that is what he was hired for, and rolled his eyes. I guess he thought I dong blocked him by just showing up in line to get a picture. I tossed the picture in the trash once I got it. Later that day I got a ball signed by Steve Garvey, who was super nice. He replaced Reggie Jackson as my hero that night. When I was 6 or 7, Hulk Hogan pretend WrestleMania chased me out of a boardroom I wasn't supposed to be playing around in at Little League Complex, Cross Bayou in Pinellas County. Anyways, the story is my dad was coaching a game for my brother's team. I went to go sneak around in an empty room. Hulk's son played baseball there too, and he must have seen me sneak in the room. I was hiding under the front desk when he came in with his Hulk voice. "Who's sneaking around in here?" and 7-year-old me nearly had a heart attack. He chased me out of the room while I snuck out, acting like he couldn't see me. Looking back at it, you can tell he was just having fun with a kid and his famous persona. But at the time I was absolutely traumatized and nobody believed my story. That is adorable. Ace Frehley of Kiss. It was at a rock and roll TV movie memorabilia convention in the mid-90s, shortly before the Kiss reunion, and he clearly didn't want to be there. He didn't talk to fans, didn't say hi, heck, he didn't even look at you when you came to his table. He just signed whatever you placed in front of him and then you were hustled away. On the other hand, Adam Batman West was at the next signing table and he was a totally cool guy. He shook hands, chatted with everyone, signed whatever we wanted. posed for pics, etc. Meeting him more than made up for Ace's early, hungover douchebaggery. R.I.P. Adam West. Man got kicked out of an orgy cause he wouldn't get out of character as 60s Batman. Awesome. I met Bill Nye as a kid. He was signing autographs at the Science Center and seemed really exhausted and sad. It's weird, seeing a famous person face to face and not seeing him in character put a lot of things into perspective for me as a child. Many years later I shook hands with Grant from Mythbusters. He was genuinely cool as frick. Was sad to hear he died. Grant was a huge loss. Exceptionally intelligent and even better human. A famous soap opera star in my country. He came into the Dairy Queen I was working at. I didn't know who he was and my co-worker started hyperventilating and went to the back. The guy was rude, and when I handed him his cone he said is that all like he expected extra because he was famous. Yeah dude, if you order one scoop you get one scoop. Didn't find out he was famous until he left and my co-worker came back to the front. This is a Dairy Queen sir, not a drama queen. I was sitting, naked, in a Korean day spa steam room when a guy who looked just like Lawrence Fishburne walked in and sat down across from me. I was there with two friends and we were talking and you could tell we were all like, is that? Could it really be Morpheus? We just kept talking and he was listening to whatever story we were reminiscing about and then he smiled at something we said and we saw the tooth gap. We all played it cool though and didn't say anything until after he left. 10/10 nice guy to hang out naked with. If it was Beverly Hot Springs I sat with him too. He must have been a regular. Bill Cosby, before all his rappiness was publicly known. He came to the restaurant in DC where I was a hostess. I came to get him for his table and he said, did you need a college degree for this job? No, man. Have you never met a server before? Diana Ross. I worked in a health club and a hotel across the street from a stadium when I was young. She came in, looked at the pool, which was a really decent lap pool, and said, my bathtub is bigger than this. I replied, go back to your bathtub then. She wanted me fired instantly. HR told me to go home for 2 days because if they fired everyone she wanted fired, the hotel wouldn't have any staff. I replied, go back to your bathtub then, you rock. I met James Brown back in the 80s when I lived in Vale. The man was dissatisfied with everything and generally drunk. Absolute flip side was meeting Mr. Rogers when I was at Pitt. That man was the real deal. You know the story of Mr. Rogers getting his car stolen. Word got around and the thieves found out. Next day, the car was returned with a note of apology. Nobody fricks with Mr. Rogers. I wouldn't say disappointing as I never was eager to meet him, but Drake. Drake was just unprofessional and egotistical when I worked with him both times. This was before he got big. First award show type level. He's told me to frick off directly and I watched his mom calm him down from a tantrum. This is the most in character story I've read this entire thread. I met Wayne Gretzky once. Dude's a bit of a chode tbh. Or I caught him on a bad day. We all get like that. His father, RIP, was so much cooler than he was. On the flip side, my brother met Gore Downey, also RIP, at a get together. He was with his girlfriend and her family at one of her parents' friends' place. They're all sitting, chatting, having a good time. Out of nowhere, Gord walks in like it's nothing. Apparently the owners of the house were friends with Gord. My brother, being a huge Tragically Hip fan, was internally freaking, but he kept cool on the outside as to not bother him. He talked with him for a while about sports and things like that. Towards the end of the night when my brother was getting ready to leave, Gord stopped him and shook his hand while saying, thank you for pretending to not know who I am. Not me personally, but my dad once played ping pong against Leo DiCaprio like 20 years ago and still hates him to this day because he lost in a game to 7 when he thought it was a game to 11. He's felt scammed for decades now, lol. You know, your dad should write to Leo's agent and tell them he wants a rematch. Wouldn't surprise me if it happens. He just strikes me as that kind of dude. Bumped into the late great Alan Rickman in London. He was just walking down Oxford Street. I said to myself, I thought quietly, that's Alan freaking Rickman. She said, no it's not. He stopped, turned around with a massive smile and said, it really is. He was obviously in a rush but was still polite and charming. Thank you for so many upvotes. As I said, AR was extremely charming and nice despite clearly being in a rush. So of the time never got over the experience. I loved all of his movies. I think the Potters succeeded so well largely due to Snape. However, Galaxy Quest will always be my favorite Al role, followed very closely by Truly Madly Deeply. You had me so worried he was a dong to you. I miss that dude. Deion Sanders. I interviewed him at an NFL military event like 8-9 years ago and he was a prick the whole time. He threw my lav mic on the ground when he was done instead of placing it in my outstretched hand. I was also active duty military at the time and the event was on a ship. Hey Sanders, if you didn't see this, frick you dude. Frick you. Deion Sanders. Yeah, but he was also capable of throwing mics dickishly to the ground at MLB events. You gotta respect that kind of versatility. Justin Timberlake. This was when I was working a drive-thru at a Burger King, around 2002 to 2003 or so. He came up at the drive-thru with someone else driving, but he was sticking his head out like hey at us. I didn't really recognize him but he asked if we knew who he was, and I said no but my co-worker said yes. Then he looked at me like you don't know and was just really confused. My co-worker said it was Justin Timberlake, and he said yeah, hello, come on man. He then sort of just had small talk. He asked us how work was, how our day was, but here's the thing. The entire time, he is leaning all the way over on the driver, who is clearly horribly uncomfortable and a bit crushed by him leaning over on him. He asked me if I was from the Middle East, and I said no, and he clearly didn't listen and then said yeah that sucks. Sorry for the whole Afghanistan thing. He then asked us if we wanted his autograph, and we said sure, and he wrote it down and gave it to us. He then said bye and left. It was all in all a really funny experience and I try not to let it influence my view of him because he was clearly on something, but he just came off a bit like a big goofy attention loving butt the entire time. Bye and left. He expected my seat on a plane. He was our local news anchor. Actually said, I may look familiar. I said, you're a merchant banker? The people with the smallest claim to fame are often the most egotistical about it. Not in but, Norman Reedus. I met him at a TWD con in Philly, and the line to get photos with him got super backed up. I think they were having tech issues or something. All of a sudden we hear a loud frick this from in the booth. Norman storms out and disappears for a solid 10 minutes. When he comes back, he's carrying a stack of pizza boxes, and went up and down the line, personally handing out slices of pizza to fans and apologizing for the delay. Legendary. Friend of mine works cons and interacted with Reedus a lot and this doesn't surprise me a bit lol. Scott Disick and Kourtney Kardashian. We met them in Cancun. They were snobby and stuck up. This was right after Mason was born. They had no interaction with Mason and the nanny did everything. They were super offended that not everyone at the airport knew who they were. I met a local weatherman from my neck of the woods. Twice. People love this dude on social media, but the both times I've seen him, he was a total butthole. On the flip side, I met Emilio Estevez at work. He was cool. Not my story but a co-worker's story. Let's call her Holly. Holly was a flight attendant many years ago and on one flight Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown were in first class. Holly was going through taking drink orders and politely asked Whitney Houston if she would like something to drink but didn't get an answer. So assuming she didn't hear her, Holly asked her again if she would like something to drink. Whitney Houston looked out the window with a disgusted face in response. Bobby Brown then said to Holly she doesn't speak to the help, then ordered for her. Imo, if you're flying commercial, you are not hot crap. I cannot fathom the level of arrogance it takes to think people are so far below you that they are not deserving of being spoken to by you. I would not have thought Bobby Brown was the politer of the two. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.